Welcome to another episode of the Phoenix Rising podcast, journeys of descending into the mysteries and rising from the roots. I am your host, Lisa Hillier, spiritual mentor and priestess. I have guided hundreds of women through my online courses, one-to-one mentorship, and Patreon portal into the mysteries within them to rise rooted into their sovereign selves. And today I have Kevin Orosz in the show with me. Kevin is a coach, entrepreneur, performance philosopher, and student of humanities myths. He is driven by offering his voice and presence to improving the lives of people all over the world. Through his podcast, The Re-Evolution, online courses, evolutionary men's work, and private mentorship, Kevin teaches others how to create more impact and success, ignite polarity in relationship, and claim their kingdom. This is such a powerful episode, and I can't wait to dive in. Welcome, Kevin. And to start, we're going to start with the big question of what has been the journey that has led you to the work that you're offering the world today.
Yeah, Lisa, great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, I mean, the journey I've been on has been really centered around relationships, masculinity, femininity, and how do we navigate that in a modern world that has zero education and close to nothing in terms of relating sexuality and the masculine rite of passage, as well as the feminine experience inside relationship, right? It goes both ways. So for me, I was born and raised in Texas, going to school, going to get my PhD in psychology. I was applying to programs, on this kind of railroad track. And I had my girlfriend at the time cheat on me, which I was in this naive codependent kind of relationship where I thought we were going to get married and do the whole white picket fence American dream. And this was a big wake up call for me, being raised Catholic and kind of buying into all that. So at that time, which I was, I think 20 years old, my entire delusion of reality dissolved, including my identity, my friend group, and my dharma, what I thought was my dharma. And so this sent me into a spiral of, drugs and alcohol and insomnia and anxiety and all these things. And luckily at the time I was studying philosophy. So I had a yoga teacher that I knew, and I also was starting to train martial arts, and I also encountered plant medicine, actual plant medicine at the time. So since then, really, I've been asking the harder questions and just threw myself into personal development, minimalism, nomadism, and, was striving to understand what had happened there. And I've ended up, the men's movement found me, and I was blessed to have a lot of amazing mentors early in my journey. Elliot Holst, I worked with Sacred Sons. I worked with Osho sannyasins. I went to India and trained yoga and meditation, and went to Burning Man and, into the transformational festival community deeply as well. And basically it was just discovering along the way, why men are blamed for everything. And there's so much addiction, suicide, depression, and all the things. And to my mind, it's the loss of the rite of passage, the loss of male kinship and mentorship, and the loss of, essentially a village holding men into their integrity. So that was a big part. Why is the divorce rate so high? Why is, sexual dysfunction and so many people, getting, dissatisfied or not getting their needs met in the dating culture, hookup culture of today? And what I realized is that, nobody's figured this out. The whole idea of mating and relating and dating is just been a kind of a trauma loop that we've been handed off from generations before us. So that's when I started to study Tantra and these areas to kind of go into that for myself. And so that's kind of been the core of my journey. A lot of it's been business development, entrepreneurship as well. And yeah, that's kind of the abridged version for you.
Beautiful. Can you speak to the rites of passage for men and what they might have ancestrally looked like and how they're kind of void in today's society, but it feels like there's a surge of them coming back?
100%. I mean, there's a lot of movements now doing this, and this is amazing that so many, groups of men are helping youth, like boys. Ideally, this would happen when, you know, you hit puberty, like 12 to 16, like that's the best time to initiate a boy. But, you know, you can do it at any age. I've been in circles with 60-year-olds, you know, going through this stuff. So it doesn't really matter. The ancestral ways are pretty brutal. So, you know, we've come a long way since like loincloths and campfires and, you know, hunting to live. So we have all these modern technologies and comforts, but, you know, in an old way, it would be an extreme fasting experience. It would be a vision quest, you know, being alone in the wilderness. It might be a hunt. It might be ritual combat. It could be an ordeal poison. You know, there's all kinds of extreme versions of this that involve, you know, scarification and, you know, bloodletting. And, you know, there's a lot of really intense versions. But the whole idea is that the boy's personality can die. And the boy goes through this dissolution process where he's confronted by the world of the father for the first time. And he's severed his connection to the world of the mother, which is being dependent, kind of being that caterpillar, just getting fat on the village and, you know, kind of being selfish, right? And rightly so, because he's growing. But as soon as his power is coming online, his violence, his ability to act violently, and his libido, you know, his ability to lust and be with a woman, he has to have that power set straight by older men who help his boy psychology essentially die and dissolve and help him understand man's psychology, which is, you know, what do you have to give? Are you a protector? Are you a provider? Where is your power going to be directed in service to this community, not against it, right? And so the loss of these rites of passage and the loss of male kinship and mentorship is really why we have things like Me Too, toxic masculinity, why we have world leaders, you know, with vast wealth and vast military and technological power who, by their actions, you know, have caused a lot of damage, right? And so this is really at the heart of what I see, that we're shifting, and it's shifting fast. It's just in terms of the mainstream and in terms of, you know, almost 8 billion of us, how fast can it shift?
Yeah. So I've had Wayne from Sacred Sons. I think he's a Sacred King, was on the podcast, and he spoke about Sacred Sons and these movements. And so what would be those initiations for like modern day men? Is it like physically challenging? What does that initiation look like?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different formats, but the essential thing is that it has the, you know, core elements of the hero's journey, or the initiation container, which is, you know, there's crossing the threshold, setting the space, entering into the ceremony or the ritual. And then there's containment. So there's a cooking or a sealed off space of intense challenge and tribulation. And then there has to be a return or an integration back into the village and kind of this like rebirth. You know, a lot of it is ritual combat. It can be shadow work. It can be breath work. Some men are using, you know, plant medicines or sweat lodge, you know, very intense psychological and physical challenges. There's also an aspect of it that is, you know, confrontation. So working with rage and anger, working with grief and sorrow, and facilitating that man to actually move that energy in connection to other men, and then place it into context. And so there's varying degrees, right? I mean, some men need a stronger cup of medicine than others, you know, and if you do this for youth, like, you know, there's amazing programs out there that are doing, you know, fathers and sons when they're younger. You know, you don't need to like press them to the limit. Like a strong amount of confrontation will be sufficient for a young boy. And that's a hugely impactful experience, especially if the father's there with other men.
Beautiful, beautiful. I was just curious because, you know, I sit in women's circles and all that kind of stuff, but can't attend men's circles. And I'm just what it is that takes place to bring a man into his power so that the feminine can trust and allow him to lead, doing her own work of surrender and all of that magics. And we see like a huge surge of men doing their work on the planet right now. And it's so inspiring and so needed. So can you speak to toxic masculinity and what that looks like, and then what it looks like for a man to return to his core essence and step into his true primal nature.
Yeah, I don't actually like that term because of how it's been weaponized by, corporate owned media. So I don't even want to use that term at all. And I think people that use that as a rallying cry or use it a lot, I don't think they actually understand what masculinity is, because masculinity is just like femininity. It's a principle that is just eternal. And it's like, it's like saying, you wouldn't say toxic sunlight, right? Like, that's how masculinity is, right? Now, there are men that are weak in there. It's like strong men aren't toxic. This is the mind fuck for people that have gone into this rabbit hole. It's actually weak men who are spiteful, resentful, bitter, that they behave in what we would call toxic, right? Or the shadow masculinity, wounded masculinity. So that's like, it's an important distinction. Yeah. Those behaviors are all based on, fear and lack and scarcity. So if a man was traumatized, which, if you're hurting people, you're a hurt person. Hurt people hurt people. So that's the tragedy here, is a lot of these men, didn't get the love that they needed or their needs met, probably in early childhood from their mother or father. They experienced abuse or trauma. And then, this is just carried on and carried forward. And a lot of the culture will support that, corporate culture, military culture, religious culture, even, a lot of these systems are not supporting men or women. And so this behavior has been allowed for a long time. And then Me Too comes along and exposes a lot of it, which I think is extremely healthy on one level. But the mob mentality and the scapegoating and like the witch hunts of cancel culture, I think it's gotten completely out of control and needs to be, reconnect to discernment and compassion, which, it's a whole nother journey. But these behaviors are all based on, if a man is afraid of intimacy or he doesn't know how to get his needs met, either through sex, money, power, whatever it is, then he'll use these abusive manipulation, strategies. And again, these men are probably not surrounded by a strong circle of men who will call them into integrity or challenge them. And they also probably, don't have a woman in their life who is in integrity or is in full power, because, certainly it's not the victim's fault, let's say, in the perpetrator dynamic. And, there is a co-creation there. So the people that are quick to say, oh, it's all men's fault, it's all this, it's like, yes, like a lot of the pain and suffering, most of the addiction, most of the suicide, most violent crimes, most of the imprisoned on this planet are men. That's true. And, this is much beyond just those men. It's, the family unit that is creating the trauma in the first place. Like, these men aren't just becoming like this out of nowhere. And how do we go to the root of, again, what is it to be a man? Does society celebrate masculinity? Does it nurture it? Are men given a place to feel powerful and actually empowered to serve their families, their community, other men in a good way with their like knowledge and their problem solving and their wealth and their creativity? And fortunately, the answer is no. And that's really what I'm most concerned about, is how there seemingly is, a war on masculinity. And there's a war on femininity as well. But right now it's very trendy to bash men and raise up women. And I think, this is not going to get us where we want to be.
Yeah, it was interesting. I saw a post on Instagram, and I don't remember who posted it, but she created a post around men's health. And it was wild how her engagement went down. Her, the amount of people that saw the post went down. Like, there was an algorithm on Instagram that stops people from seeing anything that's associated with men's health. And it feels like this agenda to keep men weak, because if we keep men weak, we're in this state of control and illusion and inversion and all of the crazy wild times that we're seeing on the planet right now, for sure. With religious systems, is there anything that comes up for you on how that keeps men in that wounded place?
Well, I mean, religion at its core, all religions share a truth. And that truth is contained in, you know, the perennial philosophy and the deep experiences that inspired those religions, which I don't pretend to know what they are, but it is interesting that they all describe similar things. So I want to say that first, because as a formerly deeply religious person, and still to this day, a deeply spiritual person, you know, I believe that there's a lot of value in religion, even as it's practiced today. And I was raised Catholic, so I had a whole, you know, deconditioning from that. Now, that being said, the way religion's practiced in most places by priesthoods is all about submission. So it's submission to God or Allah or, you know, the doctrine or the dogma, the ideology, which submission on a very deep level is very necessary. The submission of the ego to spirit, or the submission of your personality to the infinite, to God, whatever God is. That's very powerful. And this is a key part of initiation, is actually being able to submit. Now, for some people, submission is a bad word because of how much dominance and patriarchy and, you know, all these things have played out, which again are abusive versions that are not representative of true patriarchy, which is ruled by the family. It's when men and women are actually in symbiosis. And religion has used this in a weaponized way. So by restricting sexuality, by turning men into soldiers or basically workers, you know, Marx famously said, religion is the opium of the masses. And, you know, the ruling classes everywhere at all times, you know, it's not some mysterious they, it's just folks who have amassed power and military power and wealth. You know, they understand that religion has a really amazing role to pacify men so they don't question your doctrines or question the financial system. And also they fight your wars, and they become your priesthood, your monks, your, you know, rank and file that can convert your people to your religion. They can take people from other cultures and forcibly either get rid of them or bring them into your religion. And, you know, it gets pretty scary when you research the history of how religion has impacted civilization. There's a term, egregor, which basically is a huge collective thought form that's fed by people's buy-in or belief. And most religions are run by these kind of, you know, it's kind of scary how when you try to have a rational, grounded, you know, no one's blaming or projecting, but you're actually trying to have a rational, grounded discussion with someone, you know, pick any religion. I'm sure people have had this experience where they almost get hijacked, or like, it's like the Matrix where like Agent Smith comes through and they just start saying the ideology. And it's like, you're not really talking to a person or a free thinking individual. I see this with men all the time. You can see it on the internet comment sections every day. So to me, that's very concerning. And I think, you know, all the strong men I know, all the men I look up to, my mentors, you know, even if they're religious, they understand this and they are very much pro-sovereignty and pro-masculinity. And they're not just kind of like on repeat from some religion and their doctrine.
Yeah. I had an incident with my neighbor where it was that exact kind of scenario, just this ideology projected on me where I couldn't get a word in edgewise. So it is very interesting where it's almost like robotic. It's just coming at you. There's no room for discernment or nuance or layers or let's have a discussion about this. It's my way or the highway kind of experience. Beautiful. So with men, are there certain archetypes that men go through to step like into their king energy?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you know, there's an amazing book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, which a lot of people will know. Those core archetypes for men do come online in stages, in my experience. And I'm also still a young man. So, you know, most of this is through direct experience, but I've also learned from older men and been studying this field. You know, a lot of boys will kind of play with lover and warrior. So some boys are more like creative or, you know, have more of the like want to connect and be social. And those boys will have that lover come online. And other boys are more like, you know, they want to play and go out in the woods and, they might be more aggressive or better at sports or physical stuff, and they kind of have that little warrior. And so that will play out in childhood. And, some boys, rarer, will go into the magician, which is more of that, mystical, hyper creative, altered states, and very intelligent, very attuned and aware energy. So those all will play out in some level. As men get older and hit puberty into the late teens and 20s, again, this progression will play out. Again, some men will go all in on warrior. So it's all about purpose, hustle. It's all about, going and making your mission happen and providing or building your career. So that's very healthy. And I think a lot of men will have a lot of that energy. Again, some other men will explore lover more in their 20s. So they'll get into relationships. They might date a lot. They'll experience a lot of energy with the feminine. Maybe they're artists or musicians, or they're very creative and they live an alternative lifestyle. And then again, some other men will go deep into science, technology, engineering, will be called more to, what we would call a shamanic or a priest path, not in the religious sense, but in the magician archetype. And these men are usually rarer, but they will explore that well into their 30s and 40s. And then as that man builds his frame, his kingdom, they'll go from, early, middle, late prince into king. And king isn't, manifested fully until, it depends on who you ask, but, it's fine to call yourself a king. And we want to serve the king energy, which is the mature integrated masculine. But most men, that's in their 50s and beyond, right? Because they've lived through all these heroes' journeys of, growth, challenge, courtship, dating, marriage, kids, career, fulfillment, success. There's a whole story arc that happens. And the hallmark of the king is he is holding the realm through his presence and his vision. So the king is all about blessing those in his realm, blessing the whole realm with fertility. So that's his family, his community, with more wealth, more awareness, consciousness, wellness. But it's also about bringing up those under you. So most people, if you're not able to bless and mentor younger men or, your family or your people around you, you're still building up to that. So this is really what we need we need these kinds of men, to really step up and start helping the younger generations and those around them. And yeah, unfortunately, because of, pseudo rites of passage or failed initiations or just trauma and the vicissitudes of the modern world, a lot of men in their 50s and 60s, they haven't attained king, and it shows.
Yeah. With I know when you've spoken about the nice guy and how he shows up in the world. And I think every woman has had that best friend guy that's just the nice guy that'll do anything for her. And, for women, we have the people pleaser or the witch wound or dimming to fit in, which I'll call kind of more shadow archetypes as to how women show up. So with the nice guy, is that probably a shadow archetype for the masculine and how he shows up? Are there other ones, and who is the nice guy, and how do men move from the nice guy into the masculine that knows how to take the lead and serve?
Yeah, this is fascinating to look at on a generational level, because people like to shit on 1950s machismo and the submissive housewife, and our grandfather's generation and their great grandfather generation, because they were more in these traditional roles. And certainly all this stuff was still there, but the necessity of a wartime generation, the necessity of life, they didn't have Uber Eats, they didn't have Airbnb. It's different lifestyle completely. What happened is, as time moved on, as things settled down, as the modern comforts and luxuries and all the things that we take for granted today started to come online, and then you had the sex, drugs, and rock and roll of the counterculture movement. A lot of men went into exploring their feminine, and a lot of women entered the workplace and started exploring their masculine. And what happened is a whole generation had single moms raising them. Even if the father was there, he wasn't actually there. He wasn't emotionally or physically present a lot of the time. So the mother raised a whole generation of men. And a lot of those men were alcoholic, abusive, not emotionally mature. So they caused a lot of damage to their family and to others. So a lot of those boys grew up learning, oh, I'm not going to do that. You know, I'm going to be a nice guy. I'm going to fix this with a strategy of basically people pleasing, deferring to the feminine, which is a form of trying to please mommy. And that will play out in all the romantic relationships. And also just, if I'm too decisive or assertive, or God forbid, aggressive, that's not safe. You know, this is I'm speaking from experience. I've certainly done this in the past. And this is the most common thing I see with male clients and people I've worked with. That's great on one level because you're aware of what the past didn't work out, you know, how that happened. But that's not what feminine women want. That's not what your business needs. That's not what your community needs. You know, we need men that are in protection and providence and can be direct and assertive and can set boundaries and can say no and mean it and have trained their body and trained their emotions to hold a lot of energy. And that might mean being very assertive to someone that doesn't have strong boundaries or hasn't done this, will seem aggressive and will trigger them. And that's okay. You know, if someone's breaking into your house and threatening your family, you don't need the nice guy. You need fight, you need kill energy, you need fuck energy, you know, and that's what women really are drawn to. That's why women are attracted to the bad boy, right? And like nice guys finish last. There's these little adages and platitudes in culture that describe this. You know, all dark masculine, which is different than shadow. So it's that fight, fuck, kill energy. All dark masculine might be very erotic and attractive to the feminine, but it's not safe. And so it can cause trauma and like, there's not a containment there or a safety created. But all light masculine, you know, literally love and light, like too much just pure love without boundaries and too much light, like awareness, consciousness, let's talk about everything, I'll do anything, you know, that's amazing to form an emotional bond, especially if you've never felt safety in that way. But you don't want to fuck your best friend. You don't want to have sex with this person. And you'll end up mothering that man if you're in a relationship because he's not integrated. So a lot of men, you know, this is a path they have to go on. And, you know, it can be tough because you got to heal your mother wound, you got to explore the father wound. You probably need to be around more men and stop saying, oh, I'm better off with women. I have a lot of female friends. You know, I hear that a lot, which is, it's fine to have female friends, but don't kid yourself that, you know, you get along better with women than men. You need to be around men.
Yeah. Yeah. With the dynamic between the masculine and the feminine, how does that show up in a really, you know, I want to say like beautiful dynamic where they're complementing each other, the polarities, the masculine and the feminine?
Yeah, I mean, it'll look different for everyone depending on, you know, your level of fluidity. But on some level, you know, the masculine is going to be in leadership, initiating, setting the container. So setting the boundaries, right? He's the riverbanks. Here's where we're going, vision, direction. Here's the boundaries. This is what I'm cultivating. This is what I'm committed to. And that is extremely powerful because then the feminine, which is the flow of the actual river, all the Shakti, the energy, her surrender to his leadership, her ability to signal and desire in the moment and sense and use her oracle ability to guide and move the energy and also be very expressive, her emotion, her shifts, her chaos when contained like that and in that dynamic of symbiosis is, you know, what we call divine union and what everyone can just see in a couple and be like, wow, like there's so much life force there, you know. And this is the alignment of the mother and father archetype and what culture is just craving right now and what communities are based on and what the family needs. And, you know, this is why some of these agendas, which, I mean, I don't know why or who's doing them, but the effect, the result is, yeah, attacking this structure, which is the family, which is the mother and father in power together.
Yeah. I have a lot of women clients that, you know, over the years have been the one that is always making the plans, scheduling the dates, that very masculine role, taking the lead from the feminist movement. I was a single mother. I very much did it all on my own, and it was just safer for me to do it on my own as opposed to let men show up for me in life. And I use safer as quote unquote. It wasn't that, but it felt like if I do it, I know it's going to be done right. That very masculine energy coming from within me. And so for women, that are kind of like, oh, he never does anything for me. He never makes plans. He never takes the lead. Is there a way that a woman can, with her energy, like guide her man, her beloved, into starting to take that leadership role when it's just something that he's never shown up for and done?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things that the feminine is really good at tracking, like social connections, the inner circuit of tribe and the relationships around them and their network. So the feminine can be really great at that. And a lot of women excel at organization and event planning and all that. And that's amazing. But if you want to be seduced or you want to be courted or dated, it's different. So you just need to stop making the plans, stop using your masculine energy, put that energy away. Consciously shift into the feminine and be receptive and magnetic. Can you receive? And then if he's not leading or stepping in to fill it, give him signals, signal your desire for that. Let him know how good it feels when he does it, even in tiny ways. That's going to retrain him to actually be like, oh, like masculine loves to solve problems and loves to penetrate with his consciousness. So he's going to feel that receptivity, even if it's subtle, and just go for it. If you try to do it for him or tell him what he should do, it's probably going to shut down. Or if he does it, it's going to build resentment, which you don't want. So you have to go into trust as the feminine. And a lot of women, understandably don't trust, or they don't feel like it's safe to be in that they feel very vulnerable when they're receptive and feminine, which it is a vulnerable position. And if you can stay in that and hold that energy, that's when the magic starts to happen.
Yeah. With Tantra, can you speak to Tantra and what Tantra is and how it weaves and plays into the polarities?
Yeah, Tantra is a way to achieve the union of awareness or consciousness with reality as it is. So Tantra is it's a philosophy. It's also a set of practices, and it comes out of, there's Tibetan traditions, there's Hindu, there's yogic traditions. It's not just about sexuality and relating on the high level. Now, in terms of Tantra and like the neo-Tantra schools, or like this idea of Eros Gamos, or like divine union of, bringing your masculine and feminine, bringing thinking and feeling, logos and eros, into harmony, a dynamic harmony that you can experience internally, right? And this is a form of internal alchemy, and it's also a form of practice. And there's many ways into it. But for me, Tantra was the most effective and appealing modality, as opposed to Sutra, which would be more like traditional dogma or ideology, or, even with the Yoga Sutras and the yoga practices and schools, which I was very deep into and loved. It's all about, if you do this and you go down this path, this is what will happen. Where Tantra has a much wider and much more creative path. It's called the left-hand path of, essentially follow your bliss, follow what's exciting to you, and follow the energy. And in sexuality and relating, tantric practice is all about just infusing it with awareness. So bringing more awareness, bringing more aliveness, bringing more breath, not getting rigid, not getting stuck in one way of doing things, or in a sutric, position, which is more about, here's the letter of the law, I'm going to follow it, which is amazing. You need a balance of both. So for me, Tantra is more of a philosophy and like a guiding life principle. And obviously there's tons of practices in terms of, breath work and sensuality and dance and creativity that can really help you, work with that energy.
Can you speak to Logos and Eros and what that is for everybody listening?
Yeah, logos is the divine spirit of the word and of the intelligence, the divine intelligence, right? In the Bible, first there was the word and the word was God. That word logos is the Greek there. And this is the masculine spirit. It's the spirit of logic and rhetoric and intelligence and insight. And it's very powerful. It's the masculine dominant energy. And it's why we have a world that works, It's men that are building and designing a lot of the technology and the infrastructure of the world, right? Car breaks down, your computer breaks, the lights go off, you need the toilet repaired, you go to logos. And it's sacred. And it's what men are really successful at when they embody it and surrender to that energy and cultivate it. And we all have both, by the way, but men are going to be really served by logos. Eros is, it's the root of erotic or it's life force energy through the body, through the emotions, through sensations. It's the spirit of creation. So logos and eros work together, just like the masculine and feminine. And the eros is a feminine spirit, it's aliveness. Look at the natural world, look at the rainforest and the oceans and the sensuality of nature. And that's eros, flowering, expressed, exposed. And the eros energy is, what inspires artists. It's the muse, right? So again, logos can provide structure and it can provide the container, and then eros fills it with her energy.
Beautiful. It's like this beautiful dance and weaving of the mysteries, the energy of the masculine and the feminine. And it begins definitely with that inner union, so it can start to show up in our outer world. So with your work, because I know you work with couples and as well business mentorship, is that true?
Right.
Is that fair to say? Yeah. How do the polarities weave in and out and all the work that you do, how does that show up in business?
Yeah, in business, polarity is definitely present. There's masculine and feminine aspects of running a business. Mm. And most people are going to run a masculine style business just out of necessity. And that's okay. Men will excel at this, and more women are excelling at this, especially if they're an entrepreneur or they're a, coach, healer, consultant, mentor to others, and they're doing any kind of teaching, online courses, retreats, workshops, whatever. There's a lot of masculine energy in structuring the business, setting up systems, achieving goals, having targets and dates, and working with time, working with money, and working with structure. There are people that can run a feminine-led business, though, and their feminine polarity is more present, where it's, these people tend to be much more creative, much more about flow, and they'll still have masculine structure. It still has to be in an equilibrium. But feminine-led businesses looks very different. It's much more spontaneous. It can be much more, feast and famine cycles with creativity and inspiration, or with finance and wealth. And some people really enjoy that. I find most people in business, when they hire a team or they, work with someone, they usually have to hire or work with the opposite polarity, because you're going to have both. So a very feminine-led business person, a woman, let's say, will probably need a masculine polarity, OBM, or a, executive assistant or some kind of business manager a lot of the time. And just like someone who's pure masculine in their business, they might need to work with a designer, a creative person, or hire someone who has more of that feminine polarity, who can bring maybe more of that energetic into their work to really enliven it and, infuse it with more energy. So, in business, polarity is valuable to understand as a philosophical tool, and also to understand the dynamics of money, which, money is a feminine energy. But your business and your, sales, marketing, delivering your product or service, those are the masculine structures that channel the money, right? So a lot of the money consciousness, wealth consciousness, and also creative, intention with business, it can be useful to go into some of the polarity dynamics there.
I've never heard that before, that money's a feminine energy. I've heard of it as an energy and done a lot of work around money and receiving, and goddess is in money. And so are there tools that you use to open to receive more money on like a spiritual level, the kind of like that cracking open?
Right. I mean, if you go into the etymology, right, money kind of sounds like mommy. And there's an energy of, when we want money, we want sustenance, right? We want resource. And so, there's a lot of energy around money and water, right? And water is very feminine, right? We spend currency, and that's the current of the river. We put our money in a bank. Those are the river banks. There's
interesting when you start like breaking down words and stuff. I just love that. So yeah, thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
There's a secret language to etymology and how words are created. That's why it's called spelling. And there's a lot of insight into, nothing is by accident. Even electricity talks about this of current or flow, and money can also be seen like that. All the words we use for money, cash flow, liquidity, these are all water terms. So money has the flowing energy of water as an energetic, and that energy is very feminine. Now, in terms of money mindset and wealth mindset, and I'm certainly a student of this, I still have plenty of work to do on this, but something I used to do was, and I work with it differently now, I guess, but what I used to do was literally see money as like a goddess, as a feminine spirit of energy. And basically it's not about like, oh, please come, or like, let me like call you in or whatever. It's much more about, where am I blocking the receiving? There's a term in the Bible. I think it's in Psalms or something in the original translation. It's like, basically, can you trust in God and nature to give you what you want? You're so concerned about greed and wealth, but have you seen a bird in the sky, a fish in the sea that does not eat and drink freely? And this idea that, abundance is just there. And it's really about the limits you've placed on yourself to receiving it. And so in terms of the energetics of money and polarity, it's about receiving. It's actually about the feminine reception. Now, it's like raining outside, again, flow, liquidity. It's just raining. There's water/money everywhere. There's no shortage of money. The US government printed, $13 trillion, like that. Trillion. Like, you can't even imagine a trillion. $1 million. It's like, wow, imagine $1 trillion. It's just like, it's unimaginable. That's a billion's 1,000 million, and $1 trillion's 1,000 billion. It's just, anyway. So there's plenty of money. There's no scarcity. That's a myth. So that's a big first step. Is a lot of people just think there's not enough. If they get money, I lose money. You're like, oh no, there's not enough money to go around. Completely false. But now it's like, now you need structure, because it's raining. There's money everywhere. You need a bucket. You need a container. How are you going to catch it? How are you going to channel it? And this is where you build those river banks. This is where you bring in the masculine to receive and channel. And obviously you need to be adding value, and you need to be putting yourself out there in the path of money. And that's the whole art of, building a business, building a product or service, sales and marketing, etc.
Yeah. For the masculine, what does it look like to start to open to receive? It's a very feminine energy that's within all of us, to receive, receptivity, all of that. But what does it look like for a man to start to crack open, to receive, de-armor his heart, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on, where you're at, if you're in a relationship, if you're running a business, if you're just, in terms of your literal body, your soma, your feminine form, right? Matter, right? Mater, mother. Matter is feminine. So it's about loving yourself and your body. Like, that's probably the best place to start, is can you actually receive support, receive love into your physical body? And how powerful it is when you just open yourself to receive healing, sensuality, emotion, sensation at the level of the body. A lot of men struggle with that because men can live from the mind and just stay in their head. So it's a practice. It's humbling. It's not easy. A powerful woman will do this in your life, in relationship to her feminine spirit will just help you receive more in the transference and counter transference of your polarity. It just will happen. In terms of business and receiving support and receiving nurture and help, maybe around money or maybe around your purpose, this is where mentorship and coaching is really valuable. This is also where community is invaluable. Being in a community where you are reflected back and supported by other people that want you to win, right? They want to help you. And so the masculine is kind of overcoming some of the pride and ego and the bullshit stories from the past that, you can't get help. And that's a big process. It's just asking for the help and like being open to receive, and go into that stance of, open palm instead of closed fist. And that's a big journey for a lot of men.
Yeah. With relationship and just, women can crack that open in a man, and men can do so many healing, like relationship can be such a healing container for the growth of both people in that dynamic. What does a codependent relationship look like? And what does an interdependent relationship look like?
That's a good question. I mean, I think we've all experienced this. And again, I'm learning here. So I don't have the ultimate answer, because being dependent or being attached gets a lot of bad rap, right? It's like, oh, I don't want to be attached to anything and I want to be independent. And it's just not true. We're interdependent because we can't avoid it. We can't avoid attachment. It's literally how humans are designed, and we're meant to be in village and community. So there's no way around it. There's no way to avoid it. Codependency is based on agreements of scarcity and fear. So if I don't get love, you don't get love. It's transactional. Or, if you love me this way and play into my projection or illusion of how love should be, then my needs get met, and I'll uphold your projections. It's all these tacit, unconscious agreements. Maybe even some of them are conscious, where it's driven by extreme jealousy or possessiveness. So codependency will form that entanglement, and it gets really messy because you basically cross a lot of your wires, and there's not an ability to actually be free, sovereign. Like you tie yourself up to the other person, and it feels really good at first because you're going back into mother, you're going back into the womb, you're going back into like such deep intimacy. But then when you want to individuate, or there's a decision, or someone's projection doesn't get met the way they expected it to, expectations will crack. And then, you have a lot of trauma there, a lot of suffering. So interdependence is, you're still attached, hopefully secure attachment. You're still dependent on one another on some level because you're relating, you're in love. It's sacred. You're a unit, you're symbiotic. But there is a degree of space, and there's a degree of sovereignty. So you have ownership, you have accountability over your thought, feeling, and emotion, over your physicality, over how you're showing up. And you make the agreements between you conscious. That's the major difference.
How do trauma bonds play into codependency?
Yeah, trauma bonds are tricky because if someone mirrors to you a wound that you had, a trauma from your parents, from a past relationship, whatever, from childhood, which usually revolves around not getting needs met. So you had a need for intimacy, didn't know how to express it, or you did express it, it wasn't met. So you really fixate on that because you have to experience that contrast in order to let go and to heal it. You have to feel that energy. So if the other person can mirror this to you just the right way that your mother or father mirrored it, or a past partner, there's intense energy where, it might even be intense erotic energy, and you're very attracted to it because you need to go into it to decouple that. For a lot of people, you don't have to do it that way, but that's usually what happens. And this is tough. It goes straight into codependency. It can set up really unhealthy relationship dynamics. And unfortunately, if you don't have support, or you don't have an experience where you take ownership and actually learn and explore why that happened, it can just kind of traumatize or repeat in a loop. So it's usually helpful to get perspective, again, from someone who can hold you, from mentors, men and women circles, other couples who can help you decouple the trauma from the attraction and experience getting your needs met without having to go into those bonds.
Yeah. And the awareness around it is very powerful. I know there was one point in my life where I was like, this is just playing out my relationship with my father, and abandonment and rejection and all that kind of stuff that was part of that dynamic, my father-daughter dynamic. And so when I had that awareness around it, I could get to the root of what was creating that pattern and start to shift it. Are there any books that come to mind for you as kind of a starting point for somebody just new onto the path around relationships and, starting to want to come into that union that's more interdependent? In my experience, I kind of flow in and out, right, with the attachment styles. Like I'll be anxious and I'll get to just secure, but there's always the pendulum there for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I have a whole reading list that I recommend inside the program I'm running right now, Primal Polarity. And, honestly, the best place to learn this stuff isn't books, it's relationships. But, fair enough. Like, it's good to have more concepts and other people's experiences. So, I definitely recommend a lot of stuff by David Data and his protege, John Wineland. I definitely recommend, understanding the masculine and feminine archetypes. You can do Women Who Run with the Wolves or the Feminine, which I think is a great one. King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Moore and Gillette, Robert Moore. That stuff is great to get everything out in the open. If you want to go deeper into the actual dynamics, Esther Perel, her work is amazing. Actually, I haven't finished any of her books, but her concepts, her talks, her podcasts, excellent, especially if you're married or in a really long-term relationship. My book also will go deeply into a lot of this, Sex, Masculinity, and God, with my two co-authors. It's more of a philosophical, metaphysical level, but there's a lot there. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't actually matter where you start, because everyone has their own flavor of what they think relationship and its healthy version looks like. So you have to really kind of come to yourself and be like, what does it look like for me? Like, what do I need? Do I need more of the communication, authentic relatings type relationship where it's deeply based on just be open about everything and honesty? Or do you need to actually relearn some of the primal masculine, feminine polarity stuff? Do you need to understand the ancestral styles of relating? Because, there's a whole spectrum. So I would just say start where you feel called.
Is there anything you want to share around ancestral styles of relating and what that looks like?
I mean, we don't really know how our ancestors related, right? But we do know a lot from evolutionary biology and psychology. We also just know the effects of, again, living in a modern world where, we're not being chased by saber-toothed tigers, and we're not running across, long stretches of land, hunting and gathering. A lot of people like to use, Chris Ryan and Sex at Dawn, and a lot of these books like to talk about, nomadic people were more polyamorous, which was probably true on some level for sure, because there wasn't paternity per se. You're in a tribe surviving together, so that people had multiple mates, and you didn't know oh, these are my children. So you just were kind of caring for the whole family as a village, which probably worked really well for survival. That doesn't mean that that's going to work in the modern context. So when I say ancestral relating, it's more about just going to your instincts, which is all about the body. It's all about your diet, your lifestyle, your mindset. And again, it's back to masculine, feminine polarity. A really strong masculine man who's in hunter, warrior, provider, protector is going to make an amazing mate to a strong feminine woman who's in queen, oracle, priestess, and is online with her Eros, which will match his logos. And this is, it's ancestral in the sense that, thousands of generations of men and women made it work to get us here, and we're the inheritors of that. So they were doing something right. We're not going to reinvent. This is where the feminist movement, the modern, postmodern version, and a lot of this gender theory stuff, which I think a lot of it is just, it's absurd, frankly. I get that non-binary folks, which is real, and same-sex couples want to push the edges and be like, let's find new labels. Great, that's awesome. I'm not against that at all. I've worked with multiple transgender folks, and I think it's amazing. And what's interesting is polarity still works, 100%. Same-sex couples, I've worked with them. I've worked with transgender folks. Polarity still applies, because masculine and feminine have nothing to do with gender. They're energies, they're energetics. So if you go back to honoring that and understand, again, our ancestors, they weren't dumb. A lot of them were more advanced than we are today, or how advanced we think we are. You can learn a lot from that relating style, and just, committing, even as an experiment, to cultivating, and working with masculine and feminine energy, instead of just assuming that the way your parents did it or the way Hollywood or, media is showing you is working, because it's just not.
Yeah. It felt like when you spoke to that about ancestral ways more, as opposed to how our ancestors did it, like you spoke so beautifully too, it's more us connecting to our intuition and piercing through the layers that have kept us separate from our deep inner knowing that is so ancestral. It's so in our bones. We know exactly what our truth is, what we need to do, where, that deep connection to the mysteries, to God, to all of it. And when we root into that and follow that, that's when we create a really thriving civilization, as opposed to these agendas that, I don't know why they're being created, but it seems like to end humanity in a way, to move into a very artificial society, as opposed to a very human, thriving, beautiful empire. And so all of us rooting into our truth allows us to stand sovereign in what is right for us, as opposed to going with the masses and the control and the confusion. Like, the world is so confused right now, and it's such a inversion to keep us confused. And kind of when we're confused, you don't know what to do, as opposed to rooting into what is truth for each and every one of us. Yeah. Is there anything coming up for you around that?
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna think, like, conspiracy is that word is bullshit. Conspire means to breathe together. Conspiracy was a word weaponized by the CIA to prevent people from looking into the JFK assassination. And that's a fact. You can go look that up.
Wow.
Of like why that whole movement and the fringe movement was infiltrated. So we don't need to go down those rabbit holes, but yeah, there's definitely folks that don't want humans thriving, because a thriving human being that is connected, like you said, to their intuition, to their internal knowing, their own DNA code, and to God or goddess or the earth, they don't need to be subjugated by governments and medical and legal professionals. They don't need to be beholden to ideologies that disagree with their literal biology and their heart and their spirit. So that's very dangerous. I can imagine putting myself in the position of a tyrant or an oppressor. Yeah, you don't want men and women well fucked, happy and powerful, having children and living sovereign lives, because they're not going to put up with your control methods and your scarcity and your fear. So yeah, it makes sense. I'm also optimistic. Like, nothing can stop humanity from evolving, and the human spirit is immortal. It's undefeated. Humanity's undefeated. So, we might go through tough times. I think we will. We'll see some really crazy shit happen. And unfortunately, the painful part is we'll see brothers and sisters that we know and we love go into some of these artificial realities. And yeah, there's nothing you can do but have discernment and compassion and just trust the process. And obviously, each person is going to have their own free will. We're in a free will school here on earth. So everyone gets to choose, and you can make a new choice.
Yeah. It's like each and every one of us doing our own work is really serving the collective in such a powerful way. And I don't think they accounted for the human spirit, for God. And yeah, it's like the love will always win at the end of the day. Love will always win. And so I have faith and trust that we're going somewhere really powerful and beautiful. Do you hold a vision of what the new paradigm that's coming forward looks like?
I mean, it's already here in a lot of ways. It's really about, again, deconditioning and this evolutionary impulse to break out of constraints and express, again, the human spirit. So it's going to look pretty crazy. I don't really know what it will look like when it's all said and done and when it's shifting. And it may be that there's multiple timelines happening at once. There's a dystopian kind of smart city technocracy where, you know, like what's happening in China, there's a social credit system. There's completely CBDCs, central bank digital currencies that are programmed and controlled. So like your bank account can literally be censored or turned off. China literally this week released digital yuan, their currency, that expires. So you can't save it. You have to spend it at a certain time, which is,
wow,
it's disturbing. Yeah, there's stuff like that happening already, and it's crazy. And I think the United States is going through its Pluto return, and it's going to get crazier in the US. Europe's going through an energy crisis. You know, there's a lot of systemic stuff happening. The new vision that we all feel in our hearts that we want is community, it's a village. You can do it outside a city, anywhere in the world. You can go to the beautiful places that a lot of people are gathering, like Portugal, Costa Rica, Southeast Asia, Mexico, you know, Western Canada. There's places all over the world where this is already happening, but it's about getting soil, water, and food sovereignty. That's a big one, because a lot of the food and water and soil is owned by people that don't seem to want humans to thrive, and a lot of the food is poisonous. That's not from trusted sources. So we got to get that under control for sure. The elements, water, sun, you know, soil, food, we have to deal with that. Then it's about, you know, how do you want to live in the economic layer, and how do you want to transact? I'm very bullish on decentralized blockchain technology, on Web3. You know, a lot of the cryptocurrency space is full of hype and grifters and all this stuff, and that's fine. It's a frontier. That's going to happen. But the core thesis of Bitcoin, the first cryptocurrency, and more importantly, just the blockchain ledger technology itself, which is a way to anonymously, transparently, at scale, and without a middleman. So you don't need a bank or a lawyer to tell you it's okay to transact or own value or send money to anyone in the world or receive money and value. We can do it with code. And so the code becomes law. And if we infuse those technologies, which is happening, it's in its infancy, with consciousness and with abundance mindset and with, you know, the good, the true, and the beautiful, those great pillars of what we want to see, then that technology is going to help us, you know, create our own economies, create our own, you know, systems, create our own technologies that support humanity. And then there's a whole conversation about suppressed technology, which is a whole rabbit hole, you know, free energy technology, you know, not being stuck on these electric grids that are run on coal and natural gas and oil, and moving into a whole new paradigm of, you know, frequency and energy medicine, working with the energy of the earth and the cosmos to literally power, shift, and empower our full infrastructure. And I don't think this is going to happen by begging our leaders to do this. It's never worked. Hey guys, can you please just like support, you know, instead of spending 90 billion on weapons that you're shipping to the war, you know, in Ukraine, what if we spent that on improving our inner cities or feeding people, or, you know, investing in regenerative agriculture? It's like, it's never going to happen by asking the people that are doing these things to change. So, you know, stop fighting the old system, trying to tear it down, poke holes in it, start building the new one. That's the secret to change.
I love that. Start building the new one. And it's definitely happening. we see it just even with social media, like the influencers now are kind of the people that are going off grid and building their own gardens and creating their own communities and villages and all of that kind of stuff, as opposed to the celebrities. You know, there's such a want and yearning for that reconnection to the land and to living in union with the earth. And it's so beautiful. Yeah. What has been your biggest lesson along the way?
I mean, the first thing that comes up is that you have to surrender to life and the magic of, you know, are we in a simulation? Are we star seeds from other planets? You know, who and what are we, right? Everyone's asking that question, even unconsciously. Mm. The real miracle is synchronicity. And when you trust life and when you go on your path, things will happen and life will show you a bigger plan. Call it fate, call it destiny, whatever. The energy is real. And I've had so many experiences with it that I know it's not just coincidence. It's not just, oh, like you got lucky, or like, no. There's like, life is alive. Everything's alive. Nature speaks. So if you can listen to that and trust the process while still taking action, still make a plan, work your plan, take action. But then if you can listen and surrender to what's happening and really attune to like who, what, where to place your focus, your whole life will change. And, you know, I'm still in that process every day, but that's how I got here. I didn't get here because I designed it or planned it out ahead of time.
You just took the next step. Followed are there any stories of synchronicity that blew your mind that you want to share?
I mean, even me being in Bali, I don't think I've shared this one. I didn't even know where Bali was on a map for a long time. And people would come up to me, not once, not twice, dozens of times. And we're like, did we meet in Ubud? Didn't we see, I saw you at a workshop in Chengdu, because I used to work events. I was working for a nutrition company, a biohacking company. I was at events all the time and running retreats, doing coaching on my own too. So I was constantly meeting people flying all over the world. This happened dozens of times. I was like, what is going on? Come to find out, I start to research digital nomadism. I had known about Bali very vaguely before that, but it didn't really click. And then I start to look up, you know, how much tribe I had there, clients I knew there, friends there. And when I really became nomadic and started traveling the world, you know, I first went through all of Thailand and Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, India. But then I finally made my way to Bali. And that was, you know, kind of the fulfillment of this weird data I was getting. Like people were like, hey, I remember you. Like they like thought I was there. It's like I was already here. And the energy like called me here. You know, this place is very sacred. And yeah, now I've been coming here and living here on and off for the past 3 years. And, you know, following that, I could have just said, oh, that's all bullshit. Like I'm going to go over here instead. Or like, but I answered the call. I was like, no, there's something happening here. Like, this is not random. Nothing is. Yeah. That's just one example of like, you know, life calling me to be somewhere and to be with, you know, a lifeline, a path of alignment.
Yeah. Beautiful. How do you experience the mysteries?
I mean, again, the mysteries, or the mystery, the great mystery is that we are, you know, in this body here now, alive, and we have immense power to create. Like, just if you really go deep, you know, maybe it's in a medicine ceremony or alone watching the stars or in nature, and you really just feel like existence. The mystery is just here right now. And you can, like, if you get quiet enough, or even if you just relax your body, it's like this overwhelming energetic of love and motion, and, you know, it's life. It's happening now. And for me, the mystery is, again, it's back to who are we and what are we doing here? What is it to be born a human being and to be on earth at this time in this beautiful chaos? That's the ultimate mystery. It's just literally being with that question. And then obviously there's an infinite ways to express it, right? Through your art, through your love, through your writing, your poetry, your dance, your rituals, etc.
Beautiful. How do you root into the self?
I mean, I'm a masculine being and I serve logos. So when I speak and I listen, when I read and I write, I know myself. And that's my dharma. You know, I'm a communicator, I'm a storyteller and a bard. That's what I'm here to do. That's why I feel the most myself, like when I'm sharing. And I feel the most myself when I'm receiving knowledge, wisdom, mythology, you know, beautiful philosophy, beautiful poetry, even the sound of silence. And, you know, in meditation or in, you know, relaxation, I'm still in that kind of state. So that's really my way to root in.
Do you want to share your book and when it's coming out and what your book is about?
Yeah, so it's already out. You can find it on Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah. It's Sex, Masculinity, and God, the Trilogues. I wrote it with Daniel Dick and Cattle Last, two amazing men who are over in Europe. And it's really just it's like a cigars and cognac conversation between the three of us. It's a trialogue between three men from three very different backgrounds discussing the most, you know, taboo topics: sex, love, dating, death, falling in love, losing love. You know, what is God? What does metaphysics and psychology have to say about, you know, being a man and relating to women and dating and all of it? So yeah, that book is a great, if you're more philosophically or psychologically minded and you want to go into like some of the roots, and that book is rich with footnotes and references to other great thinkers. Yeah, I would highly recommend it. You can find it on Amazon.
Beautiful. Is there anything else that you want to share before we close this beautiful conversation?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the conversation, Lisa. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I think to your question about, you know, humanity and the new paradigm, you know, it's always worth mentioning that it's not worth waiting right now. It's not worth waiting to do the thing. You know, if you want to start a business, you want to travel, you need to tell someone you love them, you need to end a relationship, end a career, you need to do something that you're just kind of waiting, like, well, someday I'll do it. Someday is bullshit, especially when the world is in pure chaos. And if the last 2 years didn't teach you that, you know, a reminder to feel into where you're at and make those big moves, because we got nothing but time, and the infinite plane of our experience, you know, time is no issue. And it's time to move. So don't wait, take the leap, jump. And yeah, if you want to find out more about my work, you know, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all the places. KevinOrosz.com, myname.com. You can find out more about my, you know, I do private mentorships for clients, you know, helping them build their relationships, you know, learn polarity, you know, invigorate their dating life, their marriage, etc. I also help people, you know, grow their brands, scale their business, learn conscious sales, marketing, you know, how to build a platform to, you know, run your life the way you want to run it and monetize your creativity. So I really love to do that. And yeah, I have a free Facebook group as well, the Polarity Dojo, which you can find, which is a amazing resource where we go deep in all these topics all the time. And there's a whole library of, you know, master classes and video courses for folks there.
What's a dojo? I'm in that group. And so it's like, what's a dojo?
Yeah. Dojo is just a place to train and develop yourself, right? So it's like a martial arts dojo, you know, where you go to train and develop and learn skills. But in a broader sense, the dojo is just a place like the gym to train and develop yourself.
Okay, beautiful. And do you have any group containers coming up?
So I'm running one right now, which is Primal Polarity, which is an 8-week kind of accelerator for people. That one's running, which is going amazing. And I'm debating whether I'm going to do another one. Right now, you know, the ways to work with me are one-on-one in my online courses. And, you know, stay tuned because I'll probably do another group program, but it'll be very different than this one.
Okay, beautiful. And it'll be in the show notes. where everybody can reach out to you and experience your wisdom and your medicine. So thank you so much for this powerful conversation.
Thank you, Lisa. It's been amazing.
Thank you so much for joining me for an episode of the Phoenix Rising podcast. Please like, share, download, subscribe if you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next week for another episode on the Phoenix Rising podcast. Sending so much love.